I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
Human remains found this week.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
How can we become our best selves? That may be more about character than talent.
The ultimate mark of your potential is how far you've climbed, not how high you've gone.
Realizing your true potential with Adam Grant as we go person to person.
Hello, I'm Kaylin Huey-Burns in Washington. In an unexpected move, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis took to the stand in her misconduct allegation hearing. She testified about her romantic relationship with special prosecutor Nathan Wade. She regularly sparred with the defense attorney. Take a listen.
Ms. Willis, I'll ask you to just listen to the question, and keep the answers confined to the question as best you can. I think you'll have more than enough ample opportunity on when the state is able to
It's highly offensive when someone lies on you, and it's highly offensive when they try to implicate that you slept with somebody the first day you met with them, and I take exception to it.
And let's go now to Nicole Killian joining us from Atlanta. Nicole, I know you've been following this whole trial for a while now. What a day in the courtroom, to be sure. Let's take a step back. What kind of misconduct is the Trump team alleging here when it comes to Willis?
Well, keep in mind, this was all sparked by a complaint that was filed in January by co-defendant Michael Roman, who was a former Trump campaign operative who was charged in that indictment last summer by District Attorney Fani Willis. He basically wants not only the district attorney to be disqualified, but he wants this case thrown out. And so since filing that complaint, former President Trump has also signed on to it, as have a few of the other co-defendants. And basically what they are concerned about, or what they allege, is that they believe that the district attorney may have personally benefited from this personal relationship that she had with Nathan Wade, considering that it was her office that was paying Nathan Wade to serve as a special prosecutor in this case. And then in turn, the pair were taking these trips to places like California, Florida, the Caribbean. But what we heard from the district attorney in her testimony, as well as from Nathan Wade, is that, yes, they did have a relationship. And they both say that this started after the case was underway in early 2022, that it has since ended in summer of 2023. But the district attorney said that as far as these trips were taken, she doesn't consider them gifts, that she paid Nathan Wade back for anything that he footed in terms of the bill, and that she, took responsibility for those travel items and those trips that they took, that this wasn't all Nathan Wade paying for everything, that she paid her fair share, and not only did that, but also reimbursed him for these trips. Nathan Wade also acknowledged it as much, saying that the district attorney often paid him back in cash. So that was also a subject of the discussion. But, what is interesting, Caitlin, is that some of these defendants, some of these 19 co-defendants are in the room during this testimony, including Harrison Floyd, Trevian Cuddy, and David Schaefer, the former GOP chair here in Georgia, as well as some of their attorneys. In fact, at times, former President Trump's attorney, Stephen Sadow, was also questioning the district attorney during this period, as well as Nathan Wade. So a lot of players and entities in this courtroom in what became a very tense hearing this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that intensity, Nicole, I mean, nobody was expecting Willis to actually testify today. She came into the courtroom and took the stand. Can you kind of explain to us what that moment was like and what exactly did she say? What stood out to you?
Well, I wouldn't say it was completely unexpected. At the end of the day, she had been subpoenaed by Roman's attorney, Ashley Merchant, just as Merchant also subpoenaed Nathan Wade. And so following Wade's testimony, which lasted for several hours, then it was a question of who the next witness would be. And Merchant continued to insist that she felt that Fani Willis should testify. Kind of in the course of having those discussions between the attorneys and the judge, the district attorney walked in and said that she was willing and ready to testify. And so because she didn't object, even though she was trying to quash the subpoena just earlier this week so that she did not have to testify, ultimately she walked in the room and said that she wanted to move forward. And so from that point on, we have witnessed the district attorney on the stand again, and very contentious at times because she feels that a lot of what's in this filing is not true. She pushed back very vociferously against that, at times telling some of these attorneys not to yell at her while also taking a sharp tone herself. But we just learned that this hearing will continue into tomorrow. It is getting ready to wrap up, so we expect that Willis will be back on the stand again Friday.
Okay, an important part of a very big case down there in Atlanta. Nicole Killian, thank you very much. It is a newsy day on the court beat. Donald Trump's first criminal trial will begin on March 25th after a New York judge today denied his bid to dismiss this hush money case. It will be the first criminal trial for a former U.S. president in history. Trump is accused of paying adult film star Stormy Daniels over $100,000 to keep her quiet about their alleged affair ahead of the 2016 election. CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Bob Costa joins us now from New York. Bob, you're a campaign correspondent, but the campaign is really in the courtroom these days. What exactly happened in court this morning?
The justice in this case set the court date for March 25th. They're going to have jury selection on that day. They expect this trial to last about 6 weeks. That's a collision, as you just said, Caitlin, with the campaign trail for former President Donald Trump, right as he's going to try to pivot toward a possible general election campaign, should he wrap up the nomination against President Biden. He's going to be forced to sit through a criminal trial. And if he is the nominee, he also at the same time might be a felon. He's facing multiple felony charges in this case.
And the former president did speak shortly after he left the courtroom. Let's take a listen to some of what he had to say.
Instead of being in South Carolina and other states campaigning, I'm stuck here. It's an election interference case. Nobody's ever seen anything like it in this country. It's a disgrace. It's a disgraceful situation, actually. And we'll just have to figure it out. I'll be here during the day and I'll be campaigning during the night.
All right, so he's calling this election interference, and I heard him say this again at his rally in South Carolina last night that I was covering. I mean, this seems like the kind of rhetoric we may expect to hear moving forward. How does this kind of factor into the campaign?
Well, it's a false claim. He's claiming election interference, but he's not bringing any evidence to that point. He believes that all of these prosecutors, whether it's in the civil fraud case, that there's an expectation there could be a ruling on that tomorrow, on Friday, or in the federal cases with special counsel Jack Smith. He has all of this sense of persecution from the prosecution. And part of that, according to sources close to him, is about stoking the support of Republicans to say that their grievances, his grievances, are one and the same when it comes to describing the justice system. The challenge for him and his campaign and Republicans nationwide is there ever going to be a threshold where all of these legal challenges become a burden on the GOP as they head toward November? At this point, most Republicans I'm speaking to at the strategist level, they say this is all a blizzard of information for most voters. They're not factoring in each hearing, each trial. But you are going to have in late March, starting in late March, a former president sitting for a criminal trial. And let's not forget the disruption that could come on Friday for former President Trump if Judge Engoron, just down the street here, we're on Center Street in Lower Manhattan, if he issues a $300, $400, $500 million fine for the Trump organization in the civil fraud case, that could be very disruptive, not just for the company that has been at the core of the Trump family for so long, but for the Trump campaign.
Yeah, Bob, I mean, you bring up a really important point about kind of the idea that this is a kind of a history-making moment. I mean, can you kind of walk us through the significance of this being the first criminal trial of a former president? I know it's hard to keep track of all these cases, but that is such a major headline.
Well, one of the significant things here is that this case, the hush money case about Stormy Daniels, brings all of the issues from 2016 to the forefront of the 2024 campaign. This was an older issue. I have covered it for years. You've covered it for years. And at its core is that the story of Michael Cohen, the longtime Trump fixer, going to this adult film star, Stormy Daniels, and offering payments for her to be quiet ahead of the 2016 campaign and an election. And this is now being said by Alvin Bragg, the district attorney here in Manhattan, as a criminal scheme to deflect from campaign financial statements, to have all this done kind of under the radar. Trump has said he has done no wrongdoing here and pled not guilty to all of the felony charges. But this brings the characters of 2016 back. Michael Cohen, someone I've sat down with for CBS. He's been on the radar of political journalists and politicians for so long now. And he's such a contrast. That's the old Trump world to this new Trump world that's running the Trump campaign. Chris LaCivita, Susie Wiles, running a very corporate-style, efficient campaign. But this brings the old Trump world back, and that shakes up the whole political dynamic, potentially.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, a much more sophisticated campaign this time around, but reminders of 2016. Bob Costa, thank you for the context about these court cases. We appreciate your time and reporting. And Americans' views of the economy are improving. We'll bring you the latest CBS News polling next. You're streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
This really happened.
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response? You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
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 It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, my God.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. Yeah, it's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
Human remains found this week.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
How can we become our best selves? That may be more about character than talent.
The ultimate mark of your potential is how far you've climbed, not how high you've gone.
Realizing your true potential with Adam Grant as we go person to person.
And welcome back to America Decides. New CBS polling shows some good news for the Biden administration. 37% of Americans say the U.S. economy is doing well. Ratings of the current economy are at their highest level in more than 2 years. Meanwhile, 39% of Americans approve of the president's handling of the economy. That's a 3% increase from last month. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us now. Anthony, good to see you. So this is an interesting trend. I'm sure the White House would like any sort of upward movement, but at the same time, he's still underwater in terms of his approval. So how do you kind of explain this trend? What are you seeing?
It's both things, Caitlin. It's still net negative, but it is trending up. Let me unpack this. There's two big reasons underneath this. One is the percent of folks who say they expect over the next year or so a growing or a booming economy is trending up. Now, it's not everybody, it's a quarter, but it is up from last fall. And then I'll show you this, maybe more importantly, the percent who say they're expecting a recession coming, that is trending down. Now, what's important about all this is that underpins then that graph that you showed at the top, because you look at this over the course of the last few months, and this line is slowly ticking up. These are incremental increases, but nonetheless, look, a poll can have some variance, but you see this over time, and you start to see a trend. We've talked a lot about how what we call the macro numbers, the large economic indicators, have shown a stronger economy than Americans have been feeling. Maybe that's a lagging part of this. Maybe people are starting to catch up and start to feel it a little bit, and that's what we're seeing here, Caitlin.
Yeah, that's a really important point, Anthony, as we've been talking to voters who say that they're not feeling what they are seeing on paper yet, but we'll see the trends over the next several months. The other thing, on the minds of everyone these days is concern over Biden's mental fitness. I know you asked about this in the poll. What did you find? Yeah, we have asked about this, and we've done it for a while, and this is important. Things haven't changed much, but there is still today this concern about Joe Biden, where when we ask, does he have what people perceive as the mental or cognitive health to serve, you get this fairly low number at 35%. And it's important for a couple of reasons. One is that it's not very high, but also in context, Caitlin, we also asked this about the Republican frontrunner, former President Trump. And frankly, he doesn't do all that well either on this measure, but he is perceived as better than Joe Biden on it. So in a way, this speaks not just to the current president and voters' concerns about him, but also to the coming campaign. This is a measure that we're going to have to keep an eye on, Caitlin. Yes, certainly a defining feature of this campaign. And also earlier this week, we were all talking about the former president's very controversial comments about NATO. I know you also posed this to participants in the poll. How do Americans feel about that?
We did. It was a news-heavy week last night, so we had a lot to talk about, right? So this was one of them. Look, bottom line is big support for the U.S. defending NATO countries. It's 75% if, it's hypothetical, if there were to be an attack from Russia on those countries, people would want the U.S. militarily to promise support.
Okay, and then quickly, speaking of lots of news, the border is always kind of front and center for voters that we're talking to. What are they telling you in the poll about their concerns about it?
And here's the quick answer. Nobody does well on this. Not Joe Biden, his approval's low, not congressional Republicans. They are, and what I think is really interesting very quickly is that there was reporting about former president's influence over the Republicans in Congress on whether or not to pass this legislation, but Republican voters do in fact want Donald Trump to have some or a lot of say over what congressional Republicans do about the border. That is striking, maybe not surprising, given the former president's influence over the party as a whole, Caitlin.
Interesting that they are inviting it. Well, a lot of news and a good time to take the temperature of Americans, which you do so well. Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And in other news, Special Counsel David Weiss, who is leading the investigation into Hunter Biden, has charged FBI informant Alexander Smirnov, who provided derogatory information about President Biden and his son. Smirnov was arrested in Las Vegas yesterday. Prosecutors claim he made false statements to investigators on multiple occasions, including in September of last year. If convicted, he faces a maximum penalty of 25 years in prison. And coming up, more about that cryptic national security threat from the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. You're streaming America Decides.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has a glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's a country music legend, philanthropist, fashion icon, and now rock star.
I think there's a lot to be said about being comfortable with who you are.
Find out what's next for Dolly Parton when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She is a beloved American icon and head of a media empire. But is Oprah Winfrey happy? How do you define happiness?
Yeah, I call it happierness.
Find out when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
And welcome back to America Decides. We now know that the Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Turner's cryptic warning about a serious national security threat has to do with Russia developing a space-based anti-satellite weapon that would violate a treaty banning nuclear weapons in space. The White House has updated the public this afternoon.
This is not an active capability that's been deployed. And though Russia's pursuit of this particular capability is troubling, there is no immediate threat to anyone's safety.
And joining us now to break this all down is Margaret Brennan, CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and, of course, moderator of Face the Nation. Margaret, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. So Kirby was saying that he has some pretty broad concerns about declassifying some of this information. What exactly is he concerned about?
Well, and exactly. You don't often see John Kirby put his glasses on and read from a statement, but he's trying to hit very specific, cleared, declassified talking points. There's very limited amount of information they can disclose at this point. One of the reasons, he said, was because the intelligence community only arrived at a higher degree of confidence in its assessment within the past few weeks, and disclosing it would reveal risk, sources, and methods. But what he indicated was that this has to do with the 1967 treaty that has to do with nuclear weapons in space. So we know there's some nuclear component to what this technology development out of Russia is about. But what we know for a fact is that this classified, compartmented intelligence was shared in that classified setting, a SCIF, with the House Intelligence Committee members. That was cleared by the Director of National Intelligence for that information to be shared in that limited setting. They then went into private, were so concerned by what they learned that on a bipartisan basis voted 23-1 to say more lawmakers need to know about this because they felt it needed to be dealt with policy-wise, that it couldn't just be closely held information. It was of such high level of concern that others needed to know about it. So in terms of what was shared today with that gang of four, just the top leaders, the National Security Advisor came to answer some questions. And we know that at the tail end of that, they will also brief the Senate at the end of the month.
Yeah, and that's happened this afternoon, and leaders are coming out and addressing. If Russia were actually to deploy such a weapon, I know the White House is saying that this is still kind of a far-off idea. If this were actually to happen, is the U.S. prepared for this kind of event?
Well, and that's the argument for declassification, or at least not with the public, sharing that information with other lawmakers, right? That's what the Intelligence Committee members, both the ranking and the chair. So Democrats and Republicans are saying this is serious, this needs to be dealt with, and sharing that information with other lawmakers allows for that next conversation. What do we do about it to happen? And so this would indicate that they need some congressional approval or appropriations or some sort of policy for lawmakers to be part of. What I know from our reporting is that this has to do with the Cosmos program. This is a Russian program that has to do with launches carrying top secret payloads that the Ministry of Defense has approved and said that they are conducting. The specifics of that are where we are stuck right now. But that what has been described to me by lawmakers, by policymakers, by weapons experts is that this needs to be discussed for that question of how does it challenge America's dominance, that geostrategic balance of power. And that's why it matters. And Speaker Johnson said that he wrote a letter last month asking to meet with the President of the United States about it. That's how Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, ended up on Capitol Hill today.
Interesting. A lot of fast-moving parts here. You also spoke with Jen Easterly, who is the director of CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. What did she have to say about this?
Well, the director spoke with me about her recent trip to Ukraine and that concern broadly about Russia and the threat it poses. I did ask her, as did many others there today, other journalists, about this weaponization of space and this new disclosure. She couldn't get into the details, but she said, don't look at these things in a vacuum. The war in Ukraine should be seen as this broader indication of Russia's intent and threat. Take a listen.
I think it just further reinforces the fact that Russia is a very real threat. It's a threat to U.S. national security. It's a threat to global security. It's a threat to all of our critical infrastructure. We know space is a key piece of that. And it just reinforces the point that we cannot do anything that further empowers Putin and his ability to, if Ukraine falls, his ability to then go into Europe.
So Easterly oversees the agency that really tries to protect U.S. infrastructure. Just think about how interconnected satellites are, technology is with the basic infrastructure that not just the government has something to do with, but the private sector and what you and I, use on a daily basis in terms of technology. So this broader threat of Russia being willing to just blow past norms, international treaties. There's a reason John Kirby brought it up, this idea. The world agreed not to do this, and Russia, we think, is doing this for a reason, because of those continued challenging of international laws and norms.
Yeah, and I think that's so accessible to everyday Americans who would be concerned about this, but interesting to see her kind of connect the dots at a time that Republicans in Congress, of course, are pushing back, very critical of funding for Ukraine.
Well, at least the speaker won't entertain the vote,
exactly,
right, on that national security supplemental. So very much of the moment.
Exactly. Margaret Brennan, thank you so much, as always, for your reporting. We appreciate that. And that does it for us today. We will be back with another edition of America Decides on Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
Original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The